I'm Alan Robarge, a relationship coach and a psychotherapist, and I like to talk about attachment injuries and healing attachment trauma. And on this video, I want to talk about change. I want to talk about healing work. I want to talk about self-directed healing and how do people change? And what are some of the obstacles that get in the way of committing, of beginning, of creating focus, and allowing ourselves to change the old habitual patterns of relationships, the patterns that are not working in our lives. And yet we don't change the patterns. And they continue to stay in this routine, habitual, day after day, month after month, year after year. And so we want to really look at healing work as work and what's getting in the way of making that happen. Now, for this video, it's going to be potentially a longer video, and I created a bunch of cards to go through. And one of the challenges of making a video is the flow and the content and putting it all together. So I'm acknowledging I might look at my cards here in order to bring this home. I have been focused on healing work as a priority, part of my identity, something that I have immersed myself in for over 25 years, to the point that it was not only a hobby, it was a full-time job outside of a job and eventually became my job. And I am aware that not everyone jumps in so completely the way I have valued walking this path of self-reflection and growth and maturing based upon the places that are hurting, based upon the obstacles, the internal obstacles that we experience around our own sense of self, and particularly what I focus on and what I think is so important are relationships. Everything is about a relationship. We are connected, we are interconnected, we are in relationship to ourselves, to the people around us, to our work, to our identity, to the world at large. And if we do not value how we create relationships, chances are we are going to mindlessly be going through life recreating relationships that aren't working. We want to change the pattern. But what's getting in the way of changing the pattern? Now, there's this idea, there's a Krishnamurti quote that I learned via reading Joseph Campbell, and I like to change the quote and mess with it a little bit. But if I recall the original, because I've morphed it so much, the original is about this idea of enlightenment, and enlightenment is a very focused spiritual path of working with your mind. And the quote is not so much about whether it is or isn't about enlightenment, because that's the thing I changed. The quote is about seek enlightenment the same way that a man whose hair is on fire seeks a pond. And I change that and I say, seek your healing work. Seek healthy relationships. Seek saying goodbye to family dysfunction. Seek sobriety and ending your relationship to addictions the same way that a person whose hair is on fire seeks a pond. There's an urgency to this. This is not for the faint of heart. This is not for the lazy. But that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about some of the obstacles and the universal the universal challenges that get in our way from being able to prioritize our healing work so that we are in alignment, in integrity with our higher values of how we're growing and maturing. And if we don't do this, then we won't grow, we won't change, we won't mature. If we won't do this, our relationships will continue to be cycling and recycling in some toxic, dysfunctional, unsatisfied, frustrating tension. And therefore, it feels like if we do nothing, we're just sitting there watching our hair burn on fire. Does this sound intense? Does this sound extreme? The answer is yes. And of course, this is a type of message that will not resonate with everyone. Why is it so extreme? Why must it be such violent imagery? The urgency. Because if you are on the receiving end, if you have 25 times, 30 times, 40 times, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years of crushing suffering in your life that are the result of relationship distress and relationships that continually belittle your sense of worth, where you betray who you are as a human being, you deny yourself to the point that you're an empty shell of a person, not even in the relationship, going through the motions, because you have some childhood history of abandonment and neglect and being ignored, and it needs attention. It is lodged in your psyche. It's lodged in your felt sense body. It is lodged in your nervous system as attachment trauma. And the attachment trauma is looping, and you have a series of triggers and experiences in your life, stressors that keep provoking it. And the place or the seat of where it lives is in your attachment system, which it's going to get triggered and show up when you are experimenting with vulnerability, emotional openness, and trust, and all you want to do is love and be loved. But it is at that place, or in the exchange of loving and being loved, that the attachment trauma, the attachment injuries, the attachment wounds, we can use many words here, that it gets provoked. So at some point, if you have been around the suffering block a number of times, and each time you are just smacked in the face, and the phrase I use is when it has to do with self, lack of accountability, lack of integrity, and I have been trained to tolerate accepting crumbs of non-relating, and so I throw myself out the window. Metaphorically, I betray myself. And I use that imagery because once I throw myself out the window, it's not usually a choice. It just happens. It's part of all of the different pieces of the puzzle coming together, the trauma reenactment, the engaging in the habituated ways that we have a template in our mind, our attachment style, our attachment template that we are mirroring what is familiar of family, what we know, and we are okay. We can tolerate being treated poorly and creating relationships that are lackluster and relationships where we don't demand that much. And that where we learn to put ourselves on hold, we learn to be abandoned, we learn to be rejected, we participate in our own being ignored. We participate in our own neglect. We ignore self-care. We engage in self-neglect. If you have done this for years and years and years, at some point it is the equivalent of noticing your hair is on fire. And yes, we can make a joke about the fact that I have no hair. It's a metaphor. I'm using a metaphor. But my hair is on fire. My metaphorical hair, my metaphorical wig is on fire. And as Krishnamurti quote via Joseph Campbell says, seek out your healing, enlightenment, fill in whatever word. Seek out your self-care, your comfort, your compassion, your ability to feel connected in this world, to find connection, which is what we want, which is what this is about. Seek it as if your hair is on fire, because if you don't, you're going to sit there and burn. And for many of us, you know what that's like. And we have also built up a tolerance and a normalcy to sitting in the fire. And so that's the passion in my voice. Besides the fact I'm committed to this as my identity and my life's work, besides the fact that I just find this inspiring. And then thirdly, I give a shit. In my own life, this is important to me, and I really value talking about this with you and with others, because healing work is a viable, concrete, identifiable form of focusing one's life, assigning meaning to where you need to grow, and then cultivating that meaning. And you do this through ritual, you do this through therapeutic intervention, you do this through creativity, you do this through community, you do this through rewiring your brain, and you do this through grief work. This is about grief and grieving, and not only grieving what happened, but grieving what didn't happen in your life. So this video is going to continue to go into some of these obstacles that we create for ourselves and why we aren't pursuing change. And many of us say we are ready to pursue change, but we're not really doing anything about it. Or we go through the motions, and this is where it gets a lot of covert, smoke and mirrors, confused intention, and we use the word trying. I'm trying to change. I'm trying to pursue my healing work. I'm trying to participate in a path of self-directed healing. But even the word trying is a bit of a letting yourself off the hook and a rationalization to convince yourself to just burn a little longer as you sit in as you stew and marinate in the dysfunction of your life's relationships, in your attachment trauma. And it's so painful. And let me repeat, I am quite aware there are many ways to talk about this. And this particular video, you are getting me in a bit of my amped up, strong, forceful presentation, some flowery language about now your hair is on fire. And I do need to acknowledge that I am doing this purposefully because, one, I just have passion about it, but also I'm aware that I'm going to be simultaneously talking to a group of people that their ears perk up and they wake up to this energy. And then also some people are going to be turned off because it's a little forceful and it has a very strong presentation. Please know I could create a completely different video of the same content and deliver it in a bit more of a digestible, slower pace. And if that's what you need, then please pick and choose the content and morph it in such a way so that you can digest it. Because what's important is that you get the message and not necessarily whether you agree or disagree with the actual presentation, or if you like or dislike the actual presentation. I want to talk about what are the obstacles and challenges to creating change and what things that we need to do very concretely to make this happen. Now, I have many videos, and I recently moved 180 videos into a video library so that everything is organized and structured into categories, and we can find these items. This is about developing a catalog of content that is all pointing towards and all part of the foundation of self-directed healing. And I have a series of videos about what the heck is self-directed healing. It means you find some innate grounded sense of an observer self, your wisdom self, your own inner therapist self, and you begin to make choices to define clearly with boundaries, what are you working on, what needs focus, and what are the very concrete steps, the next steps you need to do to allow to get yourself to one step closer to achieving whatever goal of maturity. And some of us do not go through that thought process to even map out what we are working on. We stay stuck in confusion, which is, of course, a legitimate state of mind that happens. But please know, after 20 years of talking with clients and then experimenting, exploring, talking about what actually gets in the way, confusion oftentimes is a buzzword that reinforces non-commitment. And it can be a rationalization, a justification, a way of disempowering ourselves from actually having to show up in our own life. And it reinforces, I can't attend to my hair being on fire because I'm just so confused about where the pond is that I'm supposed to run towards the pond and dunk my head. The first thing that we need is a real strong innate sense, some internal spark, and I'm using this fire metaphor, some internal spark to get off the couch and at least take one step closer to where you think your particular pond might be. This is not a passive process. I cannot tell you what pond you need or where that pond is located. Another therapist cannot tell you where that pond is, the pond you need, or where it's located. Another relationship coach cannot tell you exactly the type of pond you need, where it is, and how you're going to get there. And please know, there are many people out there who have elevated their own, through their own will, their belief that they can tell you how to get there. And they can't. This is about you coming into a contemplative, grounded, silent place to create focus on what do you need to do next that is going to bring you one step closer to self-care, strengthening your sense of worth, defining how you can be in relationship from a mature adult place. How do you heal your family wounds, your legacy of attachment injuries? How do you grieve in a way that is life-giving as opposed to emotionally crushing and you don't just spiral into hell around your own painful emotional experience? These are skills, these are concrete skills, and we need to step up to making a declaration and owning in a sense of taking a stand in our own life. And do you feel the intention here is to communicate some kind of inspiration? My passion in this moment is in service. Can you get inspired to really clearly define what does self-directed healing mean to you? What particular areas do you want to focus on? And how are you going to get there? If you do not answer those questions, and perhaps you're looking for me to tell you what to do, or you're looking to find it in a book, or you're looking to read it or to watch it in a video, and waiting for someone else to define your path, it will not work. It could be helpful. You could learn some tools along the way, and it might give you ways to brainstorm, but you are always going to come back to this place. When are you going to find the spark of inspiration to choose to enter this process of healing, of maturing, and of growing? Now, this video and everything I'm talking about, and I'm going to reference, I have created a community, a membership community called Improve Your Relationships. And the program is an 8-week program, and what we are doing is all guided by this principle. And so I am addressing this video to anyone who is in that program. I'm addressing this video to anybody who's curious about the program and wants to join us. And then this is also for the whole audience at large of anyone who feels stymied, stuck, and challenged around creating change and being able to engage and prioritize their own healing work. So as I said, I have some notes, and this is the part where it might not go as smoothly as I want to go through my notes just a little bit to see where I'm at in this process of my rambling. I'm going to use an example from what I have learned. The membership community I've created, Improve Your Relationships, started in July. So when we reach January 1st, we are at a new 6-month, it's been going for 6 months. It's relatively young. but with the research that I have done and the conversations that I have had with members who join and members who exit, there are two reasons why people join, and there are two reasons similarly why they exit. The first reason is that people are sick and tired of repeating the same old patterns of relationships that are no longer working or have never worked. Or we could also identify them as dysfunctional relationships, or empty relationships, or painful relationships, or tension-filled relationships, or relationships that are based on attachment distress, and your nervous system is just whacked out and on edge, and you are so stressed out all the time just by right of being in this relationship. And a very simple way of saying it is, you got a lot of drama in your life. And the relationship itself is pretty much the main, or one of the main sources of your drama. So people join the community. They find me, they find the message, they find the 8-week program, the resources, the videos, everything I offer. And there's something attractive about, I really cannot continue. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired in these relationships that don't work. Something has got to change. So there is an awareness. We have the foundational identifying the problem and saying, this is a problem, it has got to change. And then the other reason why people join, the number one reason, is looking for structure and direction. There is that confusion around, well, what do I do? I might be able to identify that I'm sick and tired. I might be able to identify what is not working. And we still need some direction, even as we cultivate and find that spark of self-directed healing. There is this idea in therapy, such thing is called pre-therapy. Or another way of, so what that means is that it's an educating process that people need to be educated about actually how to use therapy. So sometimes we are going through a series of sessions, or it could be even months, to develop certain skills of self-reflection and certain skills of being able to track one's own mind, and certain skills of knowing how to identify and communicate with felt sense experiences in your body, and certain skills of just mapping out how do you create a plan of healing and how do you begin to implement it. And then the skills of, in a therapeutic context, it's about relationship, and you're relating with a therapist, and there's a practice quality to the relating. Well, for people who don't quite know how to do any of those things, or don't know, perhaps if we're entering therapy around grieving, and we might not really know our grieving skills, or what are grieving skills, or needing to name grieving skills, the therapy itself becomes a pre-therapy process where we are preparing to be able to go deeper into other levels of the work, but we can't even get there because we're doing this preliminary chapter of really assembling what are all the tools in our tool bag. So one reason why, a great reason why people would join a membership community, any type of healing community, and I'm speaking very specifically about the one I've created, is because it offers structure, and it offers direction, it offers resources, offers tools, offers some very concrete videos that says, here are some areas you can focus and things that you can look at. So let me repeat what I'm saying. I'm setting up both not only why people would pursue healing work, but also why they give up on it. And the reason why they give up on it are the exact same reasons why they join in the first place, is that they still feel sick and tired. They still feel confused about not have any structure or direction. And here's the caveat, or here's what's underneath that. Many people do not make a commitment to begin. They just simply don't. And this links to what I was just talking about, this idea of pre-therapy. And I want to speak about it in the context, this program that I've created is about community. It is not a therapy program. But I want to compare therapeutic process to self-directed healing process, or just a healing process. And that oftentimes we can be very sophisticated at being bullshit artists. And we can be very sophisticated at creating our own confusion as an obstacle. And we can be very sophisticated at putting up smoke and mirrors to go through some motions to make it appear as if we are trying to engage our healing work. But at the end of the day, when we really look in the mirror, what have we done? We really haven't done anything. And we have not clarified what is your plan of self-directed healing and when are you going to commit to start working at it on a regular basis. This is about accountability, about self-accountability. This is about focus. This is about discipline. This is about boundaries. This is about self-care. This is an act of self-loving. As you nurture a very committed plan and a path of a regular frequency of addressing and being able, when you are put on the spot and someone asks you and says, what are you working on with regards to your healing work today? You need an answer. You need the clarity. You need to have done the work, put in the investment 2 days ago, last week, with your journal, going for a walk and reflecting in meditation, some contemplative practice, to allow yourself to settle and for some focus to come into your awareness that says, yes, I'm working on grief. I'm working on boundaries. I'm working on shame. I'm working on my relationship to self. I'm working on my relationship to basic self-care. I'm working on my relationship to family. I'm working on my partner relationships. I need to really focus a good 6 weeks on my relationship with my children. And if you cannot answer that question, then the other things that you think that you're trying to do around healing work are empty efforts. And you're not going to see the momentum. You're not going to see any identifiable change in your ability to learn new skills of relating, in your ability to show up a little differently in your life with yourself, in your ability to have a deeper, grounded sense of knowing of who you are, what you want, and what you're willing to do to get it. So we very much need to be able, this all comes down to, this all boils down to, not are you ready? The common question that people, get asked is, are you ready to change? Are you ready to heal? Are you ready to do this work? And it's very easy. And many, many people, they have good intentions and they very sincerely, yes, they are ready. As I said, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired of our relationships that are not working. And we know that we need some direction and some structure. But it's not, are you ready? Are you willing to do the work? And do you know how to do the work? And for some of us, that means literally, it's very, very simple. This is not challenging. This is not some special, the top 12 secret healing practices that you need as a new life hack to unlock, your ability to change. It's so much more simpler than that. Did you put this on the calendar? Did you create a quiet, contemplative place or space to enter a dialogue with yourself? And you say, self, what do you need? Self, I'm going to take the next 20 minutes to just hang out and let's be intentional. Let's be intelligent. Let's be compassionate. And we also need to be a little serious. This is not for the faint of heart when we're talking about suffering, when we're talking about crushing suffering, and when we're talking about a suffering that has very real-world consequences on shutting us down as a person, and also denying us relationships where we feel loved, and or we're even able to identify partners who are capable of loving us back. In my opinion, that's pretty serious. And as a human being who also joined you in my own personal challenges to create those types of relationships in my life that have sustainability, that have longevity, and that provide that level of secure attachment. For me personally, and I'm assuming if you got this far on this video, for you also, this is really important stuff. And that's how we come full circle back to, well, there is an urgency. Our hair is on fire. And yes, we know we're ready to do healing work. We have that sincerity. But are we able to put in the work, and are we going to put in the work? And the research that I've done in a very short period of time of people leaving the membership community, a predominant percentage that it comes back to being too busy. I'm too busy. And yes, we know that is a legitimate response, and the reality of life is very taxing, and people are working 2 jobs and have to do the laundry and have children. And keep in mind, while you're doing all these other things, your hair is on fire. Or we could play with that imagery and say, your heart is on fire. Or if we play with the imagery and say, well, you are mirroring the neglect and the abandonment that was brought onto you through your life's history, most probably in your family system and in your family relationships, where you have an attachment wound around being abandoned, rejected, neglected, or ignored. And you have integrated that approach of being, and you actually treat yourself the same way. So by denying yourself, creating very clear, concrete, disciplined, focused, self-directed healing plans and mapping it out, you're neglecting yourself. And you will not be able to own directly the pain of saying, I've given up on myself again. I'm so overwhelmed and confused about what to do in my healing work. So therefore, I am going to abandon myself and continue to do the same thing I've always done. And I can at least say I tried to pursue some healing work. I tried that program. I tried to engage in that meditation. I tried to take yoga. And this is how it becomes really challenging, that we have to have compassion for the habitual behaviors, the obstacles, the lack of discipline. We have to have empathy for ourselves that we are creatures of habit. We have to have empathy for ourselves that we do lack a lot of agency to be able to really, move these things forward. But we also have to, in a neutral, no bullshit kind of way, be honest with ourselves and say, trying is in fact a distraction, and that we gave up on ourselves. And we did not clearly invest commitment and time and focus. Let me look at my notes. How are we doing? I'm feeling the intensity of the after effects of the big energy, the kind of lull, the exhale, the sadness. That for some of us, this is capturing, this is what we do to ourselves repeatedly, is there's this very big cheerleader, let's get on board, and I'm going to address finally what's going on, and I am really going to, and then we fizzle out and we implode and we feel exhausted, because remember, I said, the third time saying the main reason why we enter and participate in a program is because we're feeling sick and tired, and then we come back to still feeling sick and tired. We need a plan, and I want to map out some ideas about this plan. So as I've already said, so the goal here is self-directed healing. That we have identified really clearly. The next is also about clarity of where to focus your self-directed healing. And I've already made mention to that. The third aspect of a goal to focus on, and this is all folded into the membership community, is a community, it's called Improve Your Relationships, and it incorporates an 8-week program that is built into the structure. So it's this 8-week program that recycles. And so I'm acknowledging these goals are also built into that, the design of the program. The goal is self-directed healing. The goal is clarity of where to focus self-directed healing. And number 3, we need a concrete, nameable plan. And I've spoken to all of those things already on this video. The next things I want to talk about are just very specifically things we need. Number 1, pick your commitment and your frequency of participation. And I'll just say it again. Pick your commitment and frequency of participation. This is not, remember, it's your choice to, how much is your hair on fire? If you can afford to sit there and burn, okay. This is not the type of people I'm addressing you right now, whoever you are. I'm addressing, I know some of my community, and I'm addressing you. People who email me, people who send me messages frequently. And this is not about saying, or what I was just going to say is that the people who contact me are equally have their hair on fire, and they get the message, they get the urgency. So this is not what we're talking about, oh, I'll get to it, I'll do it whenever. What I am suggesting, what I am proposing, what the 8-week program is, what the community Improve Your Relationships is all about. This is not about being a consumer and just signing up for something and consuming videos, watching videos. This is not about sitting back and reading other people's posts. This is not about being a window shopper to your own life. This is not about saying, oh yeah, I will casually fold this process into my life whenever I get to it. This work and how I structure it and the group of people that I'm targeting, and you might be one of them, is someone who values staying focused and committed to healing work because you know that you need to create some change. And so therefore, the first thing you need to do is pick your commitment to participate and pick the frequency of participation. Will this be daily? Will this be 2 times a week? Will this be 3 times a week? And you cannot say whenever I get to it. And so in this moment, right now, make a choice. For you, and I'm not saying that if you are not in the program. I'm talking to anybody, no matter who you are, what you're doing. If you're doing someone else's program, if you're in therapy, if you are practicing, your own process of ritualized healing work, wherever you live, all around the world, because I know people watch my videos internationally. Just in this moment, with what you need and where you're at in your life and how you know you need to confront some change and you need to challenge yourself to take the next steps. In this moment, make a commitment. Are you going to do this daily? Are you going to do this 2 times a week? Are you going to do this 3 times a week? And I'll just throw in, say, do it 4 times a week. You have got to make a choice. You can't sit on the fence and then 6 months later wonder why you have so much tension and drama and your relationships continually keep repeating on the same old pattern that they always have. You are planting the seeds today of more relationships not working out if you continue to ignore what you need to do around your self-directed healing. That is an idea that is very dear to me. I talk about it frequently, so I'm going to repeat it. We are planting the seeds of our suffering today that will show up in the future. And this shows up in couples very easily. As a couples therapist, a couples counselor, we can begin to map out literally on a calendar the cycle and the frequency in which couples create drama, argue, push each other away, repeat old dysfunctional patterns. all of this stuff has a cycle, and it has a particular life. And in my vantage point as a therapist, as a couples counselor, I can observe, and over time, clients who are with me very long term, we very easily know when the next drama, tension, attachment, distress, old pattern will rear its head. And we break down and identify what are the ingredients that go into creating this recipe of dysfunctional relating. And we can see how we then begin to take the ingredients out or change the ingredients. And what we're doing is we're changing the recipe. And it's very easy to know at certain times of the year, and after a certain amount of, each couple has the frequency to which they allow themselves to get close and experience intimacy and connection, and then the point in which they blow up and they create separation and they need to create tension and distance from each other. And it is this dance of closeness, of coming together and separating, coming together and separating, that is very predictable. So if you create a commitment and a frequency to address your healing work, you will also be creating a commitment to continually observe what are your patterns of relating, and where can you create some workable, identifiable, manageable change that's going to be a bit of a baby step or in a digestible form. So much of what we're talking about can instantly create paralysis in your brain because, quite honestly, it's very confusing and very broad because we're talking about what does it mean to be a human being. And we're talking about what does it mean to be a human being with a mind that reflects upon itself. And we're talking about what does it mean to be a human being with a mind that reflects upon itself, who desires creating connection for the sake of safety and trust and closeness and finding emotional companionship, emotional closeness in order to thrive in this world. And all of the lovely obstacles that get in the way of allowing us to do that. Self-directed healing work, creating a commitment and a frequency to begin, and a commitment and a frequency of how often you are going to focus on your work, is a valuing that you are going to not continue to go down the path that you have always gone down. Let's move on to the next thing. Pick the top 3 action steps. So for you, we need the frequency, as I just said. Now you can say, okay, I'm gonna focus on this daily, or I'm gonna really make time for this 2 times a week. Before you even begin, you need to pick what the heck are you going to do on those 2 times. Again, it's back to the degree of seriousness and clarity and focus that you want to bring to this, or if you want to be wishy-washy and say, oh yeah, I'm sort of doing healing work because I'm just sort of going with the flow. You need a plan and a path. And let me repeat, as I said earlier, not everyone's going to resonate with this message because there are many, many ways to approach this. There is going to be a chapter, there will be a period of time where taking a softer, more organic approach might work. And I'm acknowledging that there's validity to that, and I am acknowledging that some people really need that because of how hurt or crushed or exhausted that they are, that everything that I'm talking about just sounds like a lot of work. And quite honestly, that is the point of this video. If you're picking up on that, that's what I'm saying. It is work, and you got to do your work. And you're not doing your work. You're just not. And I'm holding up the mirror, and I'm holding up the mirror to myself. Everything I'm saying applies to me. I am not perfect. I'm not in order in my life. My relationships are not, totally stellar. And I have a very good friend that she and I, relatively recent, but we're doing a 30-day challenge together. And we've already decided the moment that 30-day challenge is over, we're starting a new 30-day challenge. And the idea of these challenges, we are checking in daily with each other around the very specific areas of obstacle of these patterns that we need to change that we're not changing. And for me, it's all around aspects of self-care, of getting to bed on time, of eating better, of exercising, because I work too much, because of this content, creating an online business, creating videos. I am so incredibly immersed through my passion and in alignment with that I value this, but it is taking its toll of not being balanced. So I am joining you. Everything that I'm saying, I need to also identify my frequency and commitment to what I'm working on. And I also then need to identify what are the top 3 things that I'm doing to actually move myself closer. That's the other thing. You can pick your self-care. You can pick relationships to yourself, to your partner, to your family, to your children. You can look at your childhood. You can look at grieving. You can look at grieving skills. You can look at boundaries. You can carve out and say, if you have to pick where to focus, what about your obsessive thinking? And that you're monitoring other people's thoughts and you make assumptions and judgments about how other people are treating you based upon the fantasy stories that you tell yourself. Or a relationship has ended and you continue to imagine talking to that person in your mind. Now, I'm also in this moment, if you've seen any of my videos, I am referencing a symptom of trauma, and very specifically around relationships, attachment trauma. So I have a sensitivity to knowing this is not something we just turn off. But if you are suffering from obsessive thinking and a preoccupation of a person on a relationship that ended months ago or years ago or decades ago, and yet you still find yourself looping and you have this particular trauma symptom of obsessive thinking, and this leaks into fueling fantasies of how you're one day going to get back together. Well, that's it. That's your focus. That's what you need to work on. And can you work on that in the next 6 weeks? Can you work on that in the next 8 weeks? Are you going to work on that daily, 2 times a week, 3 times a week, or 4 times a week? And then when you're working on it, what exactly are you going to do? Which leads me to my next point. Once you pick what you're working on and the frequency, a form of self-accountability is to identify what exactly are you going to be doing? What is the path that you're taking as you're running to seek out the pond? So there are many tools that exist. I'm just referencing tools that I've created around videos, tools I've created around worksheets and handouts that are all about the community, improve your relationships. There is a weekly planner that by right of the name, weekly planner, that offers some structure. There is every week you can post what did you learn, when you reflect on what you were hoping to learn, what did you learn. There is a Monday night online chat group. You can participate in the chat. You can follow up on the transcript and engage in the content of the chat. You can watch a very specific video that I've created, create a summary, and then offer a reflection around what did you learn in that video. You can also go ahead and pick, I offer what's called the core concerns and the core practices of dysfunctional relating. Insecurely attached dysfunctional relating. There's 12 of them, core concerns and core practices. You can pick one for each week, and it's going to identify a certain trait or behavior or attitude or pattern of relationship that no longer serves you. And the practice is something you can do slightly different to begin to counter that. Right there, that's structure. So I'm just acknowledging, I'm just sharing specifically some of the options that I've created as the administrator of this program, as someone who has created over 180 videos, as someone who has spent 20 years doing healing work and making it my life's work around profession, but also not only my vocation, but my avocation. So what are you working on? When are you working on it? And the next item, the next thing that you need is some form of self-accountability to return, to name, to publicly acknowledge what you're working on, or acknowledge it in such a way to yourself, but also encouragement and praise. That's the point of a community. That's why I created an online community. I could have created a series of videos that are courses. You know, take this course where you passively sit by yourself and you watch a video, and you watch the video when it's convenient for you, and you watch the video when you, I feel like this whole video, I never usually do this. I'm talking so much. I'm so passionate. I'm so dry from my head being on fire that I need to find that pond because my mouth is all dry. After you have a frequency, after you can commit to what you're working on, you identify clearly how you are going to, what vehicles or tools or worksheets or resources that you're going to use, and you set up the frequency, you have some kind of accountability component, and then you need some way to receive encouragement and support. We do not heal in a vacuum. We don't heal in isolation. This is an important distinction to make because it has come up a couple of times, and I'm glad that I remembered it in this moment. Self-directed healing does not mean isolation. Self-directed healing does not mean you value your independence and look at how incredibly independent you are, and you're doing everything for yourself, by yourself, on your own. And it's not, and self-directed healing doesn't mean don't see a therapist, don't work with relationship coaches, don't join group therapy, a support group, don't join an online community like I'm mentioning. Self-directed healing is a approach of how you orient and organize your plan of healing. And included in that plan, if you so choose or you realize that, yes, the best thing for you is to work with a therapist, well, then guess what you're doing next week? Or if your hair's on fire, you're not waiting till next week. You're going to stop watching this video right now. You're going to make a couple phone calls. It's all about urgency and how willing you are to challenge the repetitious suffering that keeps occurring in your life. So in addition to mapping out the plan, we need encouragement and we need some sense of support. And that translates into finding some other like-minded people, some community where you feel that you're held and that you're not doing it all by yourself. And incorporated into that, not only the encouragement factor, but that becomes the forum or the environment in which you can hold yourself accountable through checking in on a regular basis of what are you working on, how did it go, what are your reflections, what are you learning about yourself. And guess what? Next week, you do the same thing all over. You hit the reset button and you do it all over. This process, and I've said this before many times, I've been saying it in my life for many years, we're not talking about some extracurricular tangent to your everyday life of getting something fixed and then you're done. We're not talking about healing work as some kind of recipe or a medicine that you're going to be cured and you're done. If you approach healing work like that, possibly for some people, depending on what you are not struggling with, that might be an okay framework. I have found that that's a bit misleading, and even that creates an obstacle, because we're not talking about somehow, work on this really hard for 7 months and then you're done and then look at how happy and shiny you are. That doesn't work like that. Maybe for some people, and if it's for you, you probably stop watching this video anyway because you don't need it. For most of us, however, healing work doesn't mean, oh, I need to change and fix something that's broken and be a different person. It doesn't mean that. It means I am choosing to participate in a conscious lifestyle, in a healing lifestyle of maturing and personal growth, and I will choose a life that incorporates a contemplative path of self-reflection. And I value getting to know myself, and I value my inner world, and I value paying attention to the parts of me that are hurting and aching and need attention, and I value practicing how to give myself comfort and self-care, and I value learning how to hold my mind. This is a term in meditation I've heard many years. Can you hold your mind in the cradle of loving kindness? I mean, how beautiful is that? That's not something that you just do for 7 months, 7 weeks, and then give up on it and say, oh, look, now you totally have mastered the ability to hold yourself in loving kindness. This is an invitation to a lifestyle, and to say that you will always be on the path of personal integrity. So healing work is not about getting rid of something. It's about showing up in your fullness to stay grounded in the integrity of what you know is possible, of the type of human being that you're growing into, that you're maturing into. And included in that, or folded into that, are the type of relationships that you're creating and the type of relationships that you want. And here's the big one, the type of relationships that you're offering other people. It's not just about how you're going to get something and how you're going to be happy. This is about how you're developing and cultivating the skills that you can share with others so that they too can engage with you on certain levels of openness and vulnerability and honesty and emotional disclosure, to reveal ourselves. And that's what it's all about. That's the scary part about it. And forgive me, I'm going to repeat an idea that I've shared before. And so if you watched a number of my videos, you might have heard this one before. But there's this, it's from Schopenhauer's Porcupines, Schopenhauer, a philosopher, and talking about porcupines come together and huddle in a community because they need each other and they're a family and they want to stay warm, especially imagine it's winter, and then they prick each other. And it's too much to stay in such close contact, and so it hurts. And so you separate. And in a short while, maybe a not so short while, depending if you have an attachment style of avoidance, at some point you come around and go, you know what, I think I do need a little closeness. I'd like to experiment with that again. And then you come together and you get pricked. There's a kind of inevitability, that metaphor, that analogy, that imagery of the porcupines very much is about the places of us that are hurting, the places of us where we are challenged to be vulnerable. And the moment we practice being vulnerable, if you have attachment trauma or attachment injuries that are unintegrated, those get stirred up. That's what's getting triggered. But even let's imagine as that gets more integrated and you're not so quickly triggered by that, for all of us as human beings, that is the human condition of how do I allow myself to stay centered, grounded, present, and open in relationship, to let in love and to offer another person that equal reflection back, to mirror back that love, and to choose to initiate it. I mean, this is very complex stuff, and if you think you're going to master something in 7 weeks or 7 months, then maybe that's possible. But what I'm proposing, what I'm offering, and this is why very particular the 8-week program recycles, it's going to be different content every time because it's a different group of people. Week 1, we're talking about partner relationships. Week 2, we're talking about grieving our losses. Week 3, we're talking about family relationships. Week 5, we're talking about emotional health. Week 6, we're talking about friending ourselves. I skipped week 4. Week 4 and 8 are about your goals, and everything I'm talking about here is that's the time that you spend focusing on your goals. And the brain, the mind, what we know, this is about neuroplasticity, about the ability to change, the ability to override, rewrite, change these patterns. And this is very concrete, researchable, identifiable stuff. It's about how the brain works. And the more experiences that we have of community, be it virtual or online, the more experiences where we go out in the world and we practice creating new experiences of relating. And what I'm talking about built into the program of the Community Improve Your Relationships is every month there's something called Project Rewire Challenge. The brain rewires. And we can very proactively, I frame this and talk about this is a relationship field trip. This is not about reading a book. It's not about watching a video. This is not about sitting at home writing in your journal. It's about saying we all need, you need, if you're resonating with this content I'm talking about, that you need to practice new corrective experiences that allow your nervous system to sync up with another person in a reasonable level of challenge and risk around vulnerability and openness, trust and safety. And you really get a chance to have a corrective experience of letting someone in, allowing yourself to be seen and to be known, to be affirmed, to be valued. And you must do the same thing for the other person. You must also practice taking the risk of you're going to invite wanting to see the other person. You're going to invite really wanting to know the other person as well. And as we do this enough, and we don't have to do this in the context of a romantic partner relationship, and quite honestly, initially, it's very, very helpful to not even think in those terms, but you can do this in any relationship. You can do this with the barista at your local coffee shop, and you have a lovely, beautiful moment of laughing and enjoying each other, and you take a risk to be vulnerable and share who you are. It's about showing up in the world. This is how now we're on a very edgy place where we're not talking about healing work in the sense of clinical work. It's sort of moving into a bit broader sense of spiritual work. This is about being a human being. And this is a healing lifestyle. Or I should say, as I already said, this is what I'm proposing. This is my approach. And from that perspective, it's not going away. You can ignore it. You can be lazy. You can be a bullshit artist and fool yourself about what you're trying to do. You can lack discipline. You can lack focus. You can sit on the couch and play games on your phone, eat Doritos, and watch TV, which, please forgive me to even say it that way, is a bit non-generous. It's not very generous. I understand why we all have mindlessness techniques. I just told you I'm doing my 30-day challenges, and I have struggled greatly for the last going on 9 months. I do want to really clearly, acknowledge there is no judgment here, because we could say, pot, I have someone I want you to meet. Kettle, kettle, I want you to meet pot. I'm in the same boat. Everything that I'm sharing, and quite honestly, everything that I've created in my articles that I post in the community, the structure, the videos I make on a regular basis, all of this content is a reflection in a mirror, not only of, my life's work and my healing process, but still very much today takes me to my edge of where my hair is still on fire. And that as a human being, I join you. I'm right in line with you. I like to say, with regards to, and this is true of anyone who is in a profession of showing up as a therapist or a relationship coach, is essentially we're all selling water by the river. I mean, please know that. What I offer is is my investment of time, my education, my ability to create some structure and clarify a process. But I too am thirsty, and I too need water. And in the process, we're all in the same boat here. So I hope that this was helpful. I think that I'm almost done. I wanted to really confront our obstacles to creating change and how we are not addressing old patterns or asserting ourselves. And we are not really identifying some boundaries where we can have some discipline around those boundaries. And when we do this, we are going to, there are three things that we're going to counter. When we really focus on mapping out a plan of self-directed healing, not only saying we're ready, but actually committing to a frequency and naming what it is that we're going to do and identify the resources we're going to use to get there. The three things it counters the overwhelm and the paralysis of choice. We have a sense like, oh, maybe I could do this, maybe we could do that, maybe we do this, blah, blah, blah. Too much. But when we focus on all of the components that I shared with you here, then we begin to address, we don't feel overwhelmed like we might once have. This also counters staying stuck. I mean, some of this is just a simple obviousness. We counter staying idle. We counter not beginning. We counter our commitment to inaction. We counter our own passivity. And as I've said earlier, and this is a part that I have a sensitivity around, but sometimes, not as a judgment, but just as, let's be honest here, also our own laziness. And sometimes we give up on ourselves, and sometimes we need to because of, it's tough. It's hard stuff, and this is exhausting. But there's a difference between consciously taking a break and knowing how to monitor your pacing and to give yourself a reasonable amount of work to digest versus giving up on all of it and doing nothing. We need to look at the inertia of habitual routine. That when we employ a plan of self-directed healing, as I've mapped out here, this can counter the inertia of a habitual or habituated routine. And this is what I mean when I mention, like, my friend and I are doing 30-day challenge, is the whole point of that, is to really switch up, or change the habitual way of doing things. And that's also what's offered in this community, the membership, the Improve Your Relationships community, is that this is a place to find ground, a place to orient, a place to be centered and say, well, you're doing something differently by participating in the community on a regular basis. It's not business as usual. We have to be willing to change the habitual pattern. So I want to acknowledge that if you need help, here's the invitation, and it's requires you doing some homework before accepting the invitation. The invitation is that I can help you and or will help you with boundaries, with limitation, and with the caveat that you help yourself first. And what I mean by this is that for those members in the community, I will be available to offer, at no additional charge, a 15 to 20 minute chat. It's not therapy, and it's not me doing all the work for you, and we're not starting from scratch. So what you need to do first is you need to go through this video and really start making some bullet points of what I shared. And you have to start filling in the blanks of what is your frequency of you doing work, where do you get overwhelmed, and how are you going to counter the overwhelm, what specifically thing are you focusing on for the next 6 to 8 weeks, and what are the tools that you're using in order to work on that. If you are able to challenge yourself to map that out in a paragraph form, and you are a member of the community Improve Your Relationships, and you send me a private message in the community saying, you know what, I've done all of this, and I still feel a sense of confusion and overwhelm and lack of direction, and I don't quite know how to continue to take the next step. Please email me some aspect of what you just wrote out and what you are mapping out already. That's what I mean by meeting me halfway. So it is not coming to this with you not already investing in your process, in your path, and in your work. And if you then want to reach out and say, I need a bit of a grounding place to just review and make sure that we're on the right path, I will be able to offer you support and have that phone conversation or that video meeting with you. Now, keep in mind, there are a good number of members in the community. And so if everyone signs up right away or everyone emails me, it's going to be a bit of a challenge or a flood. So I really need you to think about if in fact you need this kind of help, or if you, so this is not something to take advantage of because you would just like to do it. I'm really singling out the people who feel that they are so without direction that they need to reach out and say, let's get on some kind of path. And that you know for some time that you're still struggling to even identify what your path is. So let me repeat, do a little prep work so that we have some good meaty stuff to talk about. But if it will be helpful to you, then I want to make this available to the members of the community. And I want to repeat, even though I just said it, I don't know how this is going to go with the scheduling and the number of people who will contact me. So I just have to say, please be patient as I work out a system that seems manageable for everyone. But I am 100% committed in my own life to this type of work. I am 100% committed to the vision of this community, and I am 100% committed to you equally finding your own center around self-directed healing and utilizing some of the ideologies, approaches, philosophies, ways to orient in your own maturing and your own growth. I want you to succeed. I want you to grow. I want you to also to feel a sense of direction in your life the same way that I do. And this is how, together, as human beings on this earth, struggling to make sense and to make peace with how do you love and be loved, and how do you create relationships that before we die, we feel a sense of belonging. And I am committed to challenging myself and challenging all of us to stay focused and work that process to arrive at that place, because it's possible, and I believe in it, and we deserve it. I hope that this was helpful. Thank you for listening. Very long video. My hair was on fire. My mouth is my mouth is dry, just talking about the whole thing. And thank you for listening.